Good morning, everyone. Before we start, I'm going to ask just for everyone to ensure that their cameras and microphones are switched off. We will ask the speakers in turn. Good morning, everyone. Before we start, I'm going to ask just for everyone to ensure that their cameras and microphones are switched off. We will ask the speakers in turn. Good morning, everyone. Before we start, I'm going. Sorry about that. It seems as though having Facebook Live on at the same time creates a bit of an echo, so I've turned that off now. As I was just saying, we're going to get started in a couple of minutes. But as I said, if everyone can keep their cameras off and their microphones off or muted, we will, if we have enough time, have questions at the end. We are set for 45 minutes, so hopefully we will have enough time for questions to be asked. If we are running short of time, by all means, do send in questions into the chat so that we can respond to them in due course. So by way of introduction, my name is Toby Cadman. I'm the co-founder of Guernica 37 International Justice Chambers. Today, we will be hearing from two of the sons of Christian Michel, Alaric and Alois, who will be giving us a personal perspective of how this matter has affected them and their family. We will be hearing from Francois Zimmeré, who has been working on this case very closely with our chambers. We're very pleased to be working with Francois and his colleague Jessica Finel on this case, having taken this to the UN Working Group on arbitrary detention. We will also be hearing from Christian Michel's attorney in India, Advocate Aljo Joseph. What I would ask you to please bear in mind that there are of course certain matters that Mr. Joseph will be able to talk about and some matters that he will not be able to talk about due to the nature of these proceedings still being before the courts in India. By way of background, for those of you who are not aware, Christian Michel is a British national who was unlawfully abducted and effectively rendered to India in December 2018. The communication that Francois and I sent to the UN Working Group sets out that Mr. Michel was effectively exchanged as part of a quid pro quo once the Indian authorities had returned the daughter of the ruler of Dubai, Sheikh Latifah, back to India after she had tried to escape. What we have seen is that Christian has now been detained for a period of 3 years in the most appalling conditions, with a total degradation of all of his human rights and fundamental freedoms. And so we are very concerned as to the current status of matters and the failure by India and the United Arab Emirates to implement an important and damning ruling by the UN Working Group on arbitrary detention. So I would like to start by asking Christian Michel's two sons, starting I believe with Alaric, who will be going first, who'll be giving a statement as to how this affects them.
Thank you very much, Toby. Thanks for that introduction, and thank you everyone today for taking the time to really come and listen what we all have to say. I really just want to briefly cover something with you guys. It's aside from the legal and political aspects of everything that's rotating around my father as of right now. I feel like we're forgetting the real victims, apart from my father, that is obviously rotting in jail as of right now, and those victims are my mother, my brother, and my sister. My sister being barely 18 years old. I think it's it's important for us to realize that, you know, we all, I think, love our mother and father, and it's tough to have one of them taken away at such a young age, and even harder, really, when we don't really understand why they're doing this to him. Um, just generally speaking, I am also, as you can imagine, extremely concerned about his well-being. We've all seen the rising number of cases around COVID in India, and my father being locked up in isolation block with real criminals isn't making it any better. I've heard reports that, you know, he is being undernourished and access to water is tough. As of right now, the phone line of the prison is actually been discontinued for a month straight now, so we haven't been able to you know, talk to him for that period of time. And sadly, the thing that hurts me the most probably about this whole case is the fact that we can't even go see him. To be honest, we're all scared of what could happen if we do. So, you know, I'm trying to keep it short, but what we're really asking for is for a trial to take place. And when I say that, it's important to keep in mind that I am scared about the trial not being a fair trial, which I think is a very, very important nuance we need to keep in mind moving forward, because we're not talking about, you know, any man that just went to India. We're talking about someone who spent 40 years of his life in India, who almost basically sees it as his home country. And, you know, as Toby recently stated, the UN gave us a ruling that honestly gave us a lot of hope. We all, you know, respect the UN as an entity around the world, but we were, as you know, also very quickly shut down by the concerned respondees. So. In a nutshell, I'm just really imploring the UK government to simply do what is right, and that in this case is protect one of its own citizens from being unlawfully treated as of right now. So thank you for taking the time to listen to me. I know we have a lot to cover, so I'm just going to briefly pass it on to my brother, and I thank you for the time.
Thanks, Alaric. So yeah, just to follow up on, well, I'd just like to add to what my brother said. So as you mentioned, we have a younger sister that had to grow without a father, hoping after 3 years that she may see him again. So United Nations decision gave us hope to all our family, and we're really awaiting every day that he may receive a fair trial and that we may see him again. And we've been waiting now for more than 3 years, and we're very concerned about this trial never happening. And the unknown is worrying and frustrating, and we really longer to see him, and we just don't know when we'll be able to see him. As my brother mentioned, my father has since he's 24 years old, he's been living almost half of his life in India. He always loved this country, and it's just really sad to see how he is now. And we're really here to urge the UK government to help us, to help my father and to help our family. Thank you.
Francois, perhaps we can hear from your side on the legal side.
Yes, first, thank you, Toby, and thank you. I thank all of you for being there and having organized this very important moment. My name is François Zimbré. I'm a lawyer in Paris and at the Geneva Bar, and I'm a former French ambassador in charge of human rights. And I have to say that I have rarely seen such a lack of respect of fundamental rights from a government, and I have to say such an indifference from the government whom citizen has been jailed in an arbitrary detention without fair trial. One has to keep in mind that the UN decision is not a political one. It has been issued by one of the highest authorities existing, capable to decide and to appreciate technically if a trial comply with the fundamental rights, comply with the treaties endorsed and ratified by India, by France, by UK. And this authority, made of lawyers and judges from all over the world, very much specialized and highly respected, clearly said that the trial applied to Christian Michel is absolutely not fair, and that his detention has to be considered as arbitrary. And this authority has urged the Indian government to release Christian Michel, and it belongs now to the UK government to raise the voice, the tone, and express indignation, and to put this question on the table of negotiation. This case, as all the violations of human rights, should be a stone in a bilateral relationship. As a former diplomat, as a former MEP, I know how important can be the political intervention in such case. Christian Michel has been jailed for political reasons. As Toby said, it has been a shameful trade against Princess Latifa. Shameful in both ways, in fact. So it should be a political solution and decision. Political and legal. One has to be very clear and very simple. What's happening is absolutely illegal. It's absolutely in contradiction with the treaties that India has ratified. And my last word, we are not talking about, we are not here only to talk about a legal case, but also on humanitarian aspects. Everyone knows how the COVID virus is raging now in India. This is out of control. Everyone could imagine the situation in the prisons of India. And I think it is the responsibility of the UK government to protect Christian Michel from the situation in the exposition of COVID in India and especially in the Indian prison. Christian Michel is not above the laws. No one is above the law. If there are questions, he has to, from Indian justice, he has to face this question, and he's willing to answer the questions and to respond. But this should be loyal, this should be balanced, and this should be in accordance with the laws. He is not guilty. He is a presumed innocent, and a presumed innocent is an innocent and has to be treated like that, and has not to face a kind of masked death penalty with this COVID risk. So I join my voice to implore the UK government to take the appropriate measures and to consider the situation of a UK citizen.
Thank you, Francois. I'd like to call on now Christian Michel's Indian attorney, advocate Joseph, if you could say a few words about the case from your perspective.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Cadman and Mr. Zimre. I think this is a wonderful opportunity for all of us to tell the world about the new world order, which has been discussed in a different way. Like you mentioned, and also Mr. Zimre mentioned, that Princess Latifa has been handed over to Dubai government as a quid pro quo, and it was a kidnapping. She has been abducted to India, and she has been given back as a quid pro quo for Christian Michel, which has been upheld by the United Nations, which is an important thing to be kept in mind. The larger question which has been coming to my mind today is whether a democratic countries working like this in quid pro quo and kidnapping is a tool which has been used for all this can be permitted. Today, what is happening in Dominica, again another kidnapping instance by the government of India. There are huge allegations which are coming against the government regarding the kidnapping of Mehul Choksi. So is it the world is going towards such kind of a situation? In Michel's case, there is a categoric finding which has been given that he has been kidnapped, he has been illegally brought to India by the Dubai government and given the permission, even though it is having a blanket permission of a extradition. Even in India, all other people, those who have been arrested before his arrest and after his arrest, has been granted bail and released, which includes the foreign citizen, the Indian origin foreign citizens also. But Christian Michel is detained in India, saying that he does not have deep-rooted connections in India. As Alaric mentioned now, he is a person who has been visiting India for last 40 years. For 35 years, 40 years, he has been regularly visiting. And he's having business interest in India. So how can it be correct that he is not having any deep-rooted connections in India? It is only because of the political reasons he has been detained. Even other instances or other cases which is happening in India, or international cases or extradition cases, what you see, it's all prosecuted because of political reasons other than the legal reasons. So the question therefore is whether the legal reasons should prevail in a democratic country or the political reason should prevail is to be addressed by the international media, especially in this context. When there is a specific direction by the United Nations to implement the recommendations given within 6 months, that date has expired on 27th of May, 2021. Even the government of India is not even showing any inclination to implement such kind of a direction given by the United Nations. That is also a willful default on the part of the government of India. As my friend Mr. Simre said, Government of India, the Union of India, the Republic of India has signed and ratified all the treaties, including the human rights treaties and other treaties. So it is the duty of the Government of India to implement when the highest organ of one of the highest organ of United Nations give a recommendation, which has been rejected as of now, in my understanding. So the illegalities by the government continues this. Now I request all my media friends to highlight it that the United Nations recommendations have not been followed by the government only because of political reasons. This is a great disrespect to the entire organization. So also moving from the democratic setup to another dictatorial totalitarianship, and this cannot be accepted. Even being an Indian, I cannot accept those things. Christian Michel's retention and his access to even telephone calls has been rejected because the telephone bills are not paid. This is what I understand. For more than a month, he was not able to talk to his family because there's a court direction per giving permission for him to call his family 15 minutes a week, which is also restrained or restricted due to the reason that they have not paid the telephone bills for a month now. This is also a great violation of human right, like my friend Zimre said. The human right is the biggest dimension to this case because the investigation is happening since last 8 years, which is not completed. They are filing supplementary charge sheets in piecemeal. And the court in one of the order categorically said that the investigation is not likely to complete very soon. Why the bail and release of Christian Michel is not happening in that circumstances is another question which I always ask to the court, which I don't get an answer, except the reply which has been given by the court saying that he does not have a deep-rooted connection in India. It is the responsibility of government of UK to respond in such kind of a situation. The High Commission on the other day has issued a letter to the judge of the special CBI court highlighting about his health condition, especially with regard to his kidney stones and the pain which he is suffering. The jail authorities were supposed to give a report with regard to that. I hope that report must have been placed before the judge. I don't have an access to that report, but in my understanding also, he is still suffering with kidney stone and other ailments, and his health is also under consideration at this point. So the humanitarian dimension, which already mentioned by Mr. Zimre, is still more to be persuaded with the government of UK. And it is a high time for the government of UK to respond to all this and request the government of India to release Mr. Christian Michel immediately. I conclude my statements. I request Mr. Toby Cadman to take back and address.
Thank you very much. So we've now heard from Francois Zimre, and we've heard from Mr. Joseph Mr. Aljo Joseph about the current situation as far as this case is concerned. What we have heard is that, and what we have seen, and what has been reported by the United Nations Working Group on Arbitrary Detention, demonstrates very clearly that this process constitutes a flagrant denial of justice. What we have to consider, we have heard calls for Mr. Christian Michel to be given a fair trial. The concern that we have is the manner in which this case has been dealt with to date. Whether it is even possible for Mr. Michel to have a fair trial in the circumstances. It is one of the very real concerns that we do have. We have seen a situation where he has been unlawfully handed over with a complete disregard for proper extradition proceedings by one state to another. We have seen him held in detention in conditions that constitutes a breach of his most fundamental rights. We have seen repeated attempts, both in Dubai before he was handed over and since he's been in detention for the last 3 years, to coerce a confession out of him. It is one of the reasons why we do not believe that the trial has even begun, because they are trying to intimidate him until he provides a confession to effectively conclude what is a very, very political case. And that is of serious concern. We have seen repeated statements by members of the government, by members of the Indian government, convicting him before he's even had a trial. In such circumstances, we have to ask the question as to whether he can have a fair trial. And if he cannot have a fair trial, it constitutes an abuse of process to put him on trial. And these proceedings should be terminated, and Mr. Michel should be allowed to leave the country and return home to his family. That is what should happen. Now, we've heard that the ruling by the UN Working Group has not been implemented, and the 6-month period has now been passed. And of course, Francois, Jessica, and I will be petitioning the UN to take further action, as they are mandated to do, for failure to implement their ruling. But let me turn this on to the responsibility of the United Kingdom government. Let us not forget that we are dealing with a British national who's being held in a foreign land, who has been subjected to the most egregious human rights violations. And there isn't a responsibility to engage in that process, politically. We are aware that there have been a number of discussions at the highest political level between both India and the United Kingdom, but we are not convinced that those discussions have reached any meaningful resolution. And so we are calling on not only the Indian government to act in accordance with the law as they are required to do, but the United Kingdom to act in accordance with their responsibilities towards a British national who is at risk of a flagrant denial of justice. We will be producing a report which will be going to the British government next week on this case and the whole set of circumstances that surround this case. We will also be submitting it to the European Union. The responsibility so far by the British government has been one of engagement with their political counterparts. But there hasn't been, as one would expect, a clear position as far as the UN Working Group's decision has been made. And what we have to look at here is the UK government's prior conduct in similar matters. And I have raised this, Francois and I have both raised this with the British government, that there have been cases in the past where the UK government has called upon other states to recognize and implement decisions of the UN Working Group and have criticized other states for not having done that. I will name one example, the Maldives with former President Mohammed Nasheed. The UK government took great steps with statements from the Prime Minister, the Foreign Minister, and the Ambassador to ensure that the Maldives implemented that decision. And that individual, Mohammed Nasheed, was released from detention, where he then was allowed to travel to the United Kingdom, where he was granted political asylum. So I have to ask the question, what is the difference between that case and this case? Mohammed Nasheed was alleged to have not had a fair trial. He was alleged to be detained in conditions in breach of human rights. There is no difference in that case and Christian Michel's case. In fact, Christian Michel's case is demonstrably worse than Mohammed Nasheed's case, yet the British government still has not taken any effective steps. So what we have to ensure is that the British government recognizes its responsibilities towards Christian Michel and his family and takes appropriate action and stronger action. We are not for a moment suggesting the British government have done nothing, but our position is they have not done enough and they need to do a lot more. I'm going to stop there so that we have time for additional questions. I'm going to ask Francois whether he has any concluding remarks he'd like to make before we hear questions, as I see that more than one person has put into the chat group that they would like to ask questions. Before we do open it up to questions, just so that we can have some form of organization of questions, I would ask that if you can use the function to raise your hand through Zoom, so that we can call upon you one by one to ask a question and find the appropriate person to answer. Francois.
I think, Toby, you have Toby and Aljo, Joseph, you have very well explained the situation. As I said, I have, unfortunately, like you, in our profession, we often see arbitrary detentions. We often deplore violations of fundamental rights by regimes that are not as democratic as they pretend to claim to be. Sometimes this applies against foreign citizens. This is the situation, but I have to say very simply, as a lawyer, as a diplomat, as a former lawmaker, have rarely seen such an indifference of the government, and in this case, unfortunately, it's a UK government, for the sake of one of his citizens, especially in a situation where his life is simply in danger.
Thank you, Francois. So we have one person who has sent in as a direct message that they have a question. So I'd like to ask Ashish, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, you have a question.
Okay, I have a couple of questions. The first is directed to Aljo. Aljo, you referred to kidnapping and the government of India working as if it was a totalitarian regime. Do you see a pattern in what you call kidnapping? as far as the current Indian government's activities are concerned? That's my first question. My second question is to either Toby or to Francois, and it's this, that the UK government, when I asked them, and I've asked them not once, but several times since maybe October of last year, as to what they're doing. Now, subsequent to the opinion provided by the United Nations Working Group, the consistent line from the Foreign Office has been that the opinion is not legally binding. So I wanted your comments on this, please.
Yeah, thank you, Ashish, for your question. Can I answer the first question, Mr. Toby?
Please.
Yes, Mr. Ashish, I think I see a pattern, because if you take the case of Ravi Pujara, then Latifa, Christian Michel, Mehul Choksi, so the new world order in a democratic country is completely changed. It is becoming a quid pro quo, and kidnapping and a quid pro quo. And we know what has happened with all these Caribbean islands. The government of India has been supplied with a lot of vaccinations in the very beginning. So we don't know what is quid pro quo. I'm just making a fact which is in my knowledge. So there are many things which is happening around this world. So this, I feel there is a serious pattern which has been developed and which has been followed, and mostly the Arab countries also follow this pattern. And instances of Latifa's sister, Princess Latifa's sister, has been kidnapped from the Oxford. So that is also another instance. So all those things, and that is also a pending investigation and inquiry, I think, in UK. And there is a High Court direction. High Court, the Family Division, has made a direction to that effect. So all those things, I think it is a new pattern which has been developed by the democratic countries for or a particular dispensation to continue with the political power. Thank you.
Francois, would you like to answer the second question?
Yes, the opinion is not binding in itself, but what the opinion says is binding in the sense of the opinion relies on text, the opinion relies on laws, the opinion relies on treaties, and the opinion has highlighted violations of these laws and treaties. And these laws and treaties are binding for India because they are a part of the constitutional body of the Indian Republic, and because India has adopted these treaties. And so it's not the opinion which is binding, it's the treaties and the international covenant on political and civil rights that are binding. So it's not an argument. They could say the Universal Declaration of Human Rights is not binding. Human rights are not binding. Yes, they are, since they are a part of the legal body in which the Republic of India recognizes itself.
And let me just reinforce that as well. A state cannot pick and choose which rules it wants to apply. It cannot pick and choose which decisions of human rights monitoring bodies it wants to adopt. It is not that question when we're talking about the enforceability of UN Working Group's decision. India, and for that matter, the United Kingdom, needs to decide whether it wants to be a democracy governed by the rule of law. And if it wishes to be a democracy governed by the rule of law, as one would hope, then of course it has to give effect to decisions made by a body such as the UN Working Group on arbitrary detention. And let us not forget that the UN Working Group on Arbitrary Detention is part of a group of a number of bodies referred to collectively as the UN Special Procedures, and of course the UN Special Rapporteur on Torture, who is also looking at the case of Christian Michel following the UN Working Group's decision. So one has to take these points into account. If India is not going to give effect to arbitrarily detaining, to holding individuals in conditions that constitute, as a matter of international law, inhuman, degrading treatment, punishment, or torture, then if that is the kind of position that India wishes to set forth, then that is a very dangerous message entirely. What we are asking for is effectively not a great deal. We're asking for India to respect and comply with its international obligations, its national and international obligations, because this is not just a matter of international law. This is a matter of Indian constitutional law, of the protection of fundamental rights are enshrined in the constitution and the national laws. And so they are not only breaching their international treaty obligations, they are breaching national law, and that simply cannot be allowed to happen. Because if we allow it to happen now, it is a very slippery slope when you start chipping away at the very cornerstones of a democracy. And that is why this is important. This case is important for Christian Michel and his family, but it is important for the wider interpretation of India's respect for fundamental rights, for the rule of law, and to actually be considered a democracy. I see we have two hands up, so I'll go to Naomi first.
Okay. Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you now.
So I'm trying different things. Right, you can hear me now, great. Okay, I've just got two questions. One's a legal one and the second one's to the family. So I'll do the legal one first. I didn't catch Mr. Zimmeray's connection to the whole matter. Could you just explain that?
Perhaps I can explain.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't catch it when he explained. Yeah, sorry, thanks.
Certainly, you may have missed the beginning. So
Yep.
Francois Zimmeray, who really needs no introduction, is a very well-recognized human rights lawyer. He is an ambassador for human rights in France, and Francois and I work together on this case, working closely with his firm and my chambers on this case for at least the last year.
Great. Okay, thank you. And on that note, I wanted to ask, since India has decided not to implement the recommendations or the declaration, how common is it for a country to ignore that? And what can now be done by the UN? What kind of things?
Francois?
Yes, if I may, I think now UN has to raise a voice, and we will inform UN and we will inform all the member states of UN, and this is the first step. And I was just thinking loudly and telling myself that when he started to be detained arbitrarily, Christian Michel was not only a UK citizen, he was a European citizen. So I'm just thinking loudly, and I think that now, based on the fact that he has been detained as a European citizen, I will inform the European Union and the European Commission, and especially the High Representative for Foreign Relations of EU, and this could lead to suspension of the trade agreements between EU and India. We have some precedents where, and if we can reach a mobilization at the Parliament and an echo at the Commission, definitely this question should become a stone in the bilateral relationship between India and UK and India and EU, because all our trade arguments are based on the assumption that fundamental rights are shared and respected, which is not the case. And there is a detail, just in a nutshell, a detail on which maybe we don't have time to elaborate, but to keep in mind that the trial for which Christian Michel is kept in custody, in prison, and has already been achieved in Italy, and in Italy he has been vindicated.
Right.
So it's also a violation of a fundamental principle that no one could be judged several times for the same thing.
Yeah.
And one has to keep in mind that even though I don't focus on the very content of the trial, but we are here talking about fundamental rights, everyone has to answer the question of justice. No one is above justice, but justice has to be judged just and fair. And but it's important as a background information to keep in mind that we are talking about a case which has been judged in Italy and where Christian Michel has been vindicated.
Thank you. And just a quick question to the family. I just wanted to clarify the ages of the two sons. You said your sister's 18, and also, do you all live in France?
So as of right now, I live in the UK. My brother and sister do. I'm 26, my brother's 24, my sister's 17. So you can see how we like to consider ourselves still young and in need of a father, like any person really should have.
And so your brother and sister are in France and you're in Britain. Yeah. And where's your mother?
In France as well.
In France. Okay, great. Thank you very much. That's everything. Thank you.
And maybe just to add to what Francois said in relation to your question, just very, very quickly. You asked whether countries do not abide by these rulings, and of course certain countries do not abide by these rulings. The question is, does India want to put itself next to Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, Egypt, and Russia, to name just a few? So that is a question that India has to ask itself. Which countries does it want to stand next to? Does it want to stand next to France and the United Kingdom, or does it want to stand next to the United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia? We have. Sorry. Okay.
Can I just supplement to what Mr. Simre said with regard to the Italian proceedings? There is a United Nations convention called Convention on Transnational Organized Crimes. That also categorically says there cannot be a twin trial, double jeopardy, and nobody can be prosecuted twice. Even if you follow that convention, India signed and ratified that convention also. Still, the government is not ready to even follow the guidelines in that convention. That is also a bigger violation with regard to the United Nations. Thank you.
As we're running short of time, we have two additional questions. So first of all, from, and I believe it's Advocate Shinta, if you'd like to ask a question.
Yes, it is to the Indian lawyers here. At this time of COVID pandemic and considering the spread of disease in Tihar jail, was any petition moved before the Indian Supreme Court regarding immediate protection under fundamental right, which is guaranteed to everyone within India, irrespective of citizenship?
Alger, I think you're.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you for the question. Initially, when the COVID started, we have moved to the High Court. Asking the High Court to release him on an interim bail. The High Court has rejected it, and which was went to the Supreme Court also. Supreme Court has rejected it. They said no interim bail can be granted. The main bail application is still now pending before the CBI court. The CBI court heard the arguments completely and it has reserved the judgment. And the court is on vacation as of now. I think the reopening will happen immediately. The High Court has all of a sudden declared holidays for the trial courts. So when the reopening, I think we will have a judgment in our hand. But I think it will take some time. Till 17th is the circular. Declared holidays. Yeah.
And the final question from Sanjukta Basu.
Yeah, my question is also to the Indian lawyer. One is that the proceedings have been concluded in Italian court. So has the CBI produced any new evidence after that decision has already been taken in Italy, where he has been acquitted? So that's my one question, whether there is any new evidence that has not only been produced by CBI, but also given to Mr. Michel, the accused, so that he can scrutinize those evidence. And also, is there a possibility of approaching to the International Court of Justice after this? What are the next steps possible for him, legal rights, his rights, both under the Indian laws as well as under the UK laws? And my final question is, can it be, I mean, is he still facing any kind of pressurization from anybody while he has been in Indian jail for like since 2018? So that's my statement.
Let me deal with your final question first, and then I'll hand over to Aljo to deal with the
Yes.
Indian law matters. So have there been any pressures? Yes, there is continuous pressure on Christian Michel. One of the concerns that we have, and we frequently had contact with Christian, even if it was for a 5 or 10 minute telephone call, which I would receive relatively frequently. We've had no contact with Christian for at least the last 3 weeks. His family has had no contact. He has had no proper confidential privileged consular access. Whenever he meets with people from the British High Commission, it is under the supervision of prison guards or CBI, one or the other. And in his most recent letter to Boris Johnson, which was communicated to Boris Johnson recently, a detailed letter from Christian sets out the repeated attempts by CBI to intimidate him, to coerce him into giving a confession. So that continues, regrettably, that continues.
Thank you.
Just adding to what Mr. Toby Cadman said, there is, I am also vehemently saying that always there was a pressure, and they tried many, ED and CBI tried many tactics for political gain and bring the political people's name in many places. As far as your first question is concerned, whether the documents or the evidence which has been brought in by the Italian court, analyzed by the Italian court, whether the same documents has been used, the answer is yes. And other than that, any other document, in my understanding, no other document has been brought in here. And in addition to that, India was a party in the Italian proceedings, and they procure all the documents directly from the Italian courts. Being a party, you will get it, and they are using it. Now, a recent statement which has been given by the prosecutor is very important at this juncture. He said that we can prove the documents through interrogatories. They got the documents from the proceedings as being a party, and now they are saying that we got the same documents in LR, in the form of LRs also, and they are saying that we can prove those documents. So it is a clear case of double jeopardy, a twin trial, a double trial on the same set of documents, which is actually prohibited under the fundamental rights, which is completely prohibited under the Indian Constitution and on many international treaties. I think the second question, I think Mr. Zimbre has to answer, whether the ICJ aspect, I think Mr. Zimbre has to answer.
Thank you.
Francois?
I think I have nothing to add on that. I would like to thank you, Toby, and for having organized this press conference, which is timely and very necessary. And once again, I would like to urge the UK government to do what's simply legitimate. And I would just say that there is a tiny margin that separates ignorance to indifference and indifference from complicity. And so I count on the media to put this plight on to the public knowledge so that no one could claim to be ignorant. And once again, there is a tiny margin between ignorance and indifference, and the government should also understand that there is a very tiny margin between indifference and complicity.
Francois, thank you very much. Thank you very much for making the time for the press conference this morning, and Elder Joseph as well, and a particular thank you to Alaric and Alois for sharing their personal feelings about how this is affecting them and their family. And thank you all very much, members of the media, for coming to hear this. Obviously, if there are additional questions that you have, by all means, put them to Francois or myself. We will be happy to respond to them as much as we can. And of course, we will be sending out the additional report, which we mentioned, hopefully next week, and we'll make sure that everyone who has attended today has a copy of that. So it just leaves me to just say thank you very much for the time. We have now reached the end of the press conference, and until the next time, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cadman. Thank you, Mr. Sim. Thank you, Alois. Bye.
You're
Thank you.